as you were coming in. And the first one I want to show you is this. So you may go in and look at your control panel on the bottom and you will say, I don't have an option to turn on breakout rooms. And it may be because you have not enabled them in your settings. So the first thing you want to check to be sure, and I'll make a copy of these slides available because I did a bunch of screenshots just to kind of walk you through because it's pretty difficult to find a user manual with this stuff on it. So you're going to your https meetingwindstream.com. If you're not already logged in, you need to log in. And then you're going to see something that hopefully looks like this, but your picture, not mine. And you're looking for the third item down, which is settings. And once you're in settings, you have some more detailed options. You want to go into the advanced settings for when you're in a meeting. And you want to do a couple of things. You want to take this toggle button and you want to make sure that your breakout rooms are enabled. And then if you want to be able to assign people to rooms, for example, let's say you set up an assignment where they're working in small groups. And so you need to make sure that the right people are in the right rooms. You want to enable this. I would just go ahead and enable it for all the time because you actually have a choice of that when you get to the point where you're starting the meeting. All right. And so that will set you up with the ability to use breakout rooms. Let me stop and ask any questions so far. Awesome. All right. So now we get to the part where you're in a class and you want to send them to some breakout rooms. So the first thing you're going to do is look along your bottom control panel, remembering that if you don't see this, you may need to mouse over it in order to see it. By the way, how many people, just show of hands, have used share screen before? Okay, everybody. So you all know it moves the control panel around on you. So if you're sharing your screen, it's up at the top instead of down at the bottom. It makes me insane. I don't know why they've done that, but anyway, you want to find your control panel and you want to click on the breakout rooms option. If you don't see the breakout room option, you want to go back and make sure you've got it enabled. And if you have, it may be that you just have too many options down here on your control panel and you need to click the more button in order to see it. All right, so when you do that, it should create a pop-up for you that looks like this. And you want to decide how many rooms you're going to have. So if you want, let's see, we've got about how many people on here? Times 4, 20 or so. Let's say we wanted 5 groups. You're just going to, put in the number 4. And then you have 2 options. You can say automatically assign participants to rooms, which means they are randomly just going to be put in there, which is kind of nice sometimes to ensure that students aren't always with the same people. Or as I referenced earlier, you can use the manual option if you need to assign people. By the way, once it's randomly assigned, if you do need to swap somebody, you can go in and use the assign button to move people around. And I have a student who's deaf in my classes this year. And so one thing that I have had to be careful of is to make sure that with the assignment, you don't have the interpreter in a different room from the person who's needing the interpretation. The same would go along if you had a second language interpreter. So you're going to put your settings in, and you're going to tell it to create rooms, and you will see it like this. And notice this button down here that says options, because I'm going to show you that on the next screen. But I want to show you what your students will see is this idea, do you want to join the breakout room? And then they're going to click on join, and you will get to see that in a minute. So you have this option automatically or manually. You decide which one you're going to do. And then your options pop up is where you can say, and I think Donna has it set this way, move all participants in breakout rooms automatically. That way they don't get the pop-up that they have to click that, yeah, I want to go to the breakout room. It'll just send them there. It's an option as to whether they can return to this main room at any time. I recommend that you select yes, because otherwise they could be out there having problems and have no way to get back to tell you about that. This is where you can set the timer. By the way, if you have it set to notify you that the time is up, if you want to use a different amount of time, this is the way you can say, no, I'm not ready to close yet. Or there was one time where I accidentally set it to close in 1 minute. And that was nice because it said Do you really want to close it? And I'm like, nope, not yet. And then the other thing that is nice, and Donna mentioned this earlier as we were talking, one thing that bothers participants is when suddenly they're just teleported back into the main room without any warning that the session is about to end. So I also recommend that you set the countdown timer, and it could be 30 seconds, it could be 60 seconds, but just something that lets them know that there's about to be something that's going to bring them back to the main room. And then when you're ready, you've got it all set up, you're going to click on Open All Rooms, and they will either get the pop-up that they have to accept, they're ready to go, or if you've set it to take them there automatically, off they will go. All right, so while they are in the breakout room, here's what they can do. They will have an option to ask for help, which is a nice fallback in case you have not given them the option to return to the main meeting room, because sometimes they won't see this. But there is an option where they can send you a message. And then if you have given them the option to leave on their own, they can also click on this to come on back. Here's the things that they can't do. And this is pretty important. They cannot see the main meeting while they are in the breakout room, which means that if this slide was showing them the discussion questions, and sometimes I'll set up 4 or 5 discussion questions and say, pick the one that makes your heart sing today, right? When they get there, they can't see these anymore. So I will show you in a minute a couple of options, but I just want to make sure that you're aware they can't see the share screen and they can't see any of the questions that you gave them. All right, so, well, let me just talk about what to do there then, because I thought I had a slide and I'm not sure I do. You have a couple of options for what to do about that not being able to see the questions. You can, if it's just, you know, a couple of questions, pop them into the chat box. And that way they can cut and paste them into whatever document they have open. My favorite is to tell them to get their cameras out, because you know they've got their phone sitting right there, and just ask them to take a screenshot of the questions so that they have them with them when they get to the breakout room. And then a nice one that I saw recently is you can create a Google Docs with the questions or whatever the instructions for the activity, whatever it is that you're wanting them to do. Nice piece about that is if they are typing into the document and you've got that Google Docs open, you can see what they're doing and how they're progressing during that breakout room, even if you're not in the room with them. By the way, you also will have an option on your screen to join them in those rooms. And so you can pop in and out of those rooms just like you would do if you were in a face-to-face classroom and you were circulating around the room to the groups. Now, a word about that. When you pop into that group, you're going to be in the Brady Bunch square. You'll be as big as they are. It's not going to be that kind of subtle lurking that you can do in the classroom where you're just kind of looking over their shoulder to see what question they're on. It can be a little jarring for the participants. So I recommend, if you're planning on doing that, it's not a bad idea, but just let them know that you will be popping in and out of each room just to make sure that everything is working okay. You're not there to join the conversation unless you are, and that they should just ignore you. And just be aware that when you come in, there's going to be a minute of, oh, she's there, right? But just ask them to imagine if you were in a classroom together and I came over to see what your group was doing, would you stop and just look at me, or would you keep going? All right. So I am not going to play this video today. By the way, that's another story for another day. If you are planning on doing a video, there is a way that you have to adjust your sound settings so that it projects the sound from your computer so that they can actually hear the sound on this. I'm going to share these slides and it will give you a link so that you can watch that on your own should you want to. By the way, it is a Zoom video, so this is one of those cases where I said 90% of it will look like what you're going to see in Windstream, but Windstream hasn't made the videos, so just bear that in mind. All right, so logistics. And I am stealing these from a really nice document about remote workshops, which translate that to mean remote classrooms. I have taken a couple of their graphics, but at the last slide, I will post a link to the whole document. It's something that you may want to take a look at because I found it very helpful. So the first two are super important. I think that doing like this is the best way of approximating the face-to-face experience, and it is not fail-safe. True story, last Tuesday, I had my class and we're all here and we're gathering, and there's one of my students who is kvetching about online learning, and every time I see her, I'm hearing her say, this just isn't as good as it would be in the classroom. It's like having Eeyore in class, right? So I said to her, you just gotta stop that. This is working fine and we're gonna get through it, right? And 30 minutes later, in the middle of the class, my computer froze. I had just asked them a question and nobody raised their hand. And I thought, dang, come on, y'all. And then I noticed not only were they not raising their hands, they were also not moving at all. So they were frozen. Not only were they frozen, but I had no mouse anymore. So there was no, I had to literally reboot my computer. Fortunately, I am using the software that Spalding provides to allow us to text from our phones or make phone calls from our phones from what looks like your office number. So I can text students without them having my cell phone number. And that's really an option. Some people share it, some people don't. I am teaching social workers to have good personal boundaries. And so I have opted not to do that, but they do have a way they can reach me because they can also text me on that number. So I had a student, I have all my student numbers in there. I picked a student randomly. I texted her and said, time out, I just lost my signal. I'm rebooting, hang on. And then I realized it was going to take me a couple minutes. I had planned to break anyway. So I texted her and I said, please tell everyone we're taking a break. We'll be back at 5 p.m. So you got to think about what is your backup plan if you're doing this when something goes wrong. And then the other part of the chart, I just wanted to notice that Canvas is doing some of these things nicely for us. And this becomes very complementary when you do the video along with the Canvas options. A little thing about optimal group size, I find it really difficult, I'm not going to lie, to do the math while I'm sitting here with the squares and trying to navigate, all of the buttons and the settings. So I'd recommend you either think about it in advance or just don't overthink it. Go, I see about 20 people on my screen, let's do 5 groups. All right. But there are some guides to nice recommended breakout size groups. Now, this is really important, and I think most of us know this in the classroom. When we're having people do presentations, we always plan on that little bit of extra time in between as they transition between groups. Somehow we get on these screens and everything we knew, phew. So plan on extra time, even in the online setting, even knowing that you can hit the button and say, send them back now, and they're here, and nobody, actually they probably do get up and go to the restroom while you're sending them back. But that actually has an impact on how many groups you want to have. So the fewer the number of people in the group, the more likely it is that each of them will be able to share. And I mentioned we'd talk about andragogy. The really nice thing about breakout groups is people who will not talk when we're all together like this actually do talk in the breakout rooms. So some of them need to have it drilled down to a smaller number of people for them to actively participate. The smaller the group, the more likely it is that everyone will share for a substantive amount of time. You're getting your active participation, right? But if you ask them to share back when they come back into the classroom, keep in mind that it's going to move you into the red zone in terms of the amount of time it will take. All right. I knew that I had a slide on this. I just forgot where I put it. So here's your reminders on how to share your questions, keeping in mind that they won't be able to see any of this when they go. All right, so I'm going to give us a chance to try this as participants, but let me stop for a minute and say, anybody have questions or comments? I saw Angela nodding quite a bit, so I'm sure I'm speaking to your experience. Anything you want to add?
I was just going to say about when you go to drop into the breakout rooms, what I found, I tried so hard to not be a surprise when I did. So I would tell them, okay, so you're going to go to the breakout rooms. I'm going to give you a few minutes to talk and to process to get started. Then when I pop in, so I can just see if you have any questions or not. And so when I pop in, I try real hard to say hi, you know, so that way I'm sort of, I don't want to surprise them, but I don't want to catch them in the middle of saying something maybe they would regret if they didn't know I was there.
Right.
So that was my intent, to be a little more noticeable when I came to their breakout room, is just to prevent them the embarrassment of telling a story or saying that Cecil is crazy or something like that. So that was my strategy.
True story. The other night when I lost my signal, because they all stayed in the classroom, it continued to videotape. So I happened to know that I could go and find out what they said while I was gone. How many think I should? No, not touching it. They did cheer when I came back. I'm not sure. I think that was a good sign. I'm going to call it a good sign. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, Steve.
If we're team teaching a class, maybe we have 3 faculty sort of in a larger class, and let's say the faculty are designated as co-hosts.
Mm-hmm.
Can each faculty member say, hey, you 4 students come with me, and then the other faculty, hey, you 4 students come with me? And is there a way
What you're going to want to do then is not do the random assignment. You actually want to tell it that you want to set up rooms, and what you're going to get, let me see if I can get back there. You're going to get something that looks like this, Steve. I don't know if you can see my arrow. But then when you click on this assign, you will see a list of everybody who is there. And you just check off the ones that you want. When it gets to the maximum number for that room, because it's doing the math for you, you won't see an option to put anybody else in there. So then you go to the next group and assign, and the next group and assign. As you move down, it's only going to show you names that haven't been assigned yet, which is kind of nice because you can't accidentally put someone in 2 rooms.
Okay, and each person who's a co-host can do this function.
So that's what Donna and I decided. And I guess my biggest take-home message, especially if you're going to do what Steve is talking about, is to play with this in advance. Because what Donna and I discovered is that little poll that I did in the beginning, I'm a co-host, she's the host because she set this up. I did not have the poll option to set it up because I didn't have this meeting in my list of my meetings, all right? So I sent her the questions, she entered them, and then I was able to have the controls. But as you're about to see in a minute, because she's a host and I'm a co-host, I should have the ability to set people up, but I do not have that option, and we're not sure why. So that's the kind of thing that I really would not want to learn right now when in 30 seconds I want to send you to rooms, okay? Other questions? That was great. Thank you. All right. Well, here's what we're going to do then is I'm going to give you a little taste of what it is like to be in a room. And, you know, if you haven't done this before, it is good to see what the student side looks like. And if you all, anybody who wants to stay on at the end, will make you a co-host, it's not going to work. What you should do is get some folks from your department or friends, or if you want to email me, I will join you. You set up a meeting and you go ahead and try playing with it so that you've had some practice with setting up groups before you're in class with your students. My husband and I have offices at home, and I got him actually to join me for one just so I could see what it looked like on the other side. He's a good sport. Okay, so your questions, and you may want to take a picture of these if you can't, I think you won't remember them, is what is one application of this that you could use today or tomorrow or within the week when you are actually teaching a class? I want you to think to the andragogy end of it. How would this enhance the learning experience? And then what's one thing that could go wrong? And when we come back, we'll share these out. And if you come up with a nice long list of things that could go wrong, we will brainstorm with you to see if we can figure out some ways to prevent or address that. All right, so Donna is going to do this. Donna, we have, excuse me, didn't mean to do that.
I
We
think
have
I have
12 participants, so why don't we do 3 breakout rooms?
Yes, that's what I've set up actually, and I did set it so that you will get the invitation to join. I didn't set it so you'd automatically put in, just so you'll see that invitation and see what it looks like.
And Donna, why don't we give them 7 minutes?
Okay,
And do you have a countdown timer set?
I do.
Okay, so
see a
you'll see a
countdown
warning
real
when you're
fast.
about to come back. The first thing you may want to do when you get with your group is to figure out who's going to report out for the group. And then just go with your questions. All right?
Okay, here
See
we
you
go.
in 7 minutes. Ian, Danny, and Deshant, if you are there, you're needing to click on the accept this breakout room button in order to transport you to the breakout room. Donna, you also have an option on your control panel to just go ahead and send them.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm seeing where it will let me move them, but oh, okay. Looks like everybody but Deshant has joined. So
Yeah. In your, let's see. If you go into your breakout rooms, it should say not assigned anymore. There's something else here. If you click on that, can you see each of the people?
I can, and the only thing it's telling me is that I can move them to another group. It's giving me an option to move them into another group, but I don't see where I can.
Do you see the room that Deshant is in?
Yes.
Okay, and he doesn't have anything different next to his name?
No.
Okay.
It just says not joined, and he's kind of grayed out.
Okay.
But it says I can move him, but I don't see a way to.
And are you recording?
I am.
Okay, so
it will probably continue recording. I guess does it continue recording the main room?
yes.
Okay. Yeah. But it looks like
Actually, I'm going to leave this slide up because that's one thing I forgot to say is the camera keeps rolling.
Yeah, and I had actually set it to stop earlier, and so as we began the meeting, just while we were in here talking and practicing, and so when we began the meeting, I missed the first little bit because I didn't realize I had to set it to start recording again.
Yeah.
So we missed the first couple minutes, but
well, hopefully the slides can kind of stand alone as well. And my goal was for them to have something that they could actually see while they're trying it. So.
Yes, I think so, and we'll make sure and get those uploaded. If you want to send them to me, and we'll package them with a video and share them.
Yeah, very good.
It also gives you a little countdown on how long the breakout room has been in, which is kind of nice. If you leave the breakout rooms open, it gives me a little in progress and lets me know how long they've been there. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah, so that if you're working on some other things, sometimes I'll pull up and do some grading, or I was writing a quiz the other night while they were in the, what you may want to do though is go visit them in their breakout rooms.
Okay.
So that they can see what that is like to have you pop in.
Okay.
That feel of belonging with one another. Hi, Donna.
Hi, I'm just popping in to say hello.
Hello. And I think another thing that I want to use as I'm planning my courses for the year is using these as very just even simple think, pair, share.
Yeah. I'm not consistently with students. Hey, Donna.
Hi, I'm just doing the pop in to say hello. Don't be offended when I leave quickly. I'm trying to get
I'm so boring. But yeah, I think the learning curve thing is definitely a thing because
Hello, Donna, popping into our meeting.
Hey, Donna.
I am. I'm doing a pop in everybody's meeting. So just saying hello. Don't be offended.
Hi.
I'm going to leave quickly, but I just am practicing my pop ins.
Yeah, we're having a good meeting. We're recording.
Oh, good. That was fun. I just did a quick pop in for everybody.
And what did they do when you popped in?
They all said, "Hey, Donna."
Stops the conversation, doesn't it?
And then just kept talking. Well, Kurt just kept talking. So he's an expert.
How much time do we have left?
We have about 30 seconds.
Okay.
So they'll be coming back soon.
And then what it'll do is ask you if you're ready to close the rooms when that 30 seconds expires, and then it will give an additional 60 seconds because that's when they get their warning.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, like I said, it's nice to have the warning. The one that I was in as a participant, we got no warning, and it's just like you're in mid-sentence, and it's just okay. So I just got the do I want to if I say close now, it will still give them another 60 seconds?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I see the countdown come up. Okay.
I'm kind of taking notes on these things. It's interesting to listen to your experience because it reminds me of all the things that I didn't used to know.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Well, that's why this is so helpful. I mean, even if you've done it before, just walking through it with someone and kind of seeing what the little nuances of things that, you sometimes don't think of.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. It's all the little stuff that catches you up. Oh, the other thing that I wanted to share with them is setting up from panel. I want to make sure that I mention that.
See, one of our groups is back. They're the early bird finishers.
Notice, so we thought we'd be tardy.
Who was that?
That was me. That's my husband's cell phone going off. It's like
I was looking at Steve. That was my guilty party guess. Donna, do we have everybody back?
Yes, everybody is back.
Okay, so I'm about to turn off my slides just so that we can talk a little easier, but I wanted to show you what's on the end here are the links to the resources that I've mentioned. So this is the place where I got a lot of the graphics, and there are a lot of nice tips for teaching remotely. And then I actually found more than a quick start user manual. So there's your link. It's worth a pot of gold. And my contact information, should you want to follow up with me, I am happy to be a guinea pig if any of you would like to practice with this before you actually try it with your students. All right, so, and Donna is going to share a videotape of this presentation along with the slides. So after this ends, you'll be able to get those resources. And yes, slides will be available, and Donna has answered that. What I'm looking at, y'all, is the chat box, which I found also very helpful. Again, that's another presentation for another day, but if you have not tried that, I definitely recommend using them. I notice that I'm an extrovert, so I tend to like to talk during meetings, and that can be a little disruptive, so I just throw things in the chat, and that kind of satisfies that need for me. So, a couple of things that Donna and I were talking about. It's kind of nice to have had her do this rather than me do it, because what I want to tell you is We literally 30 minutes before this presentation got on together, and I walked her through how to do it. And you notice that she did it successfully, right? So it is not a hard thing to learn. Donna noticed while you were gone that she could see a countdown clock that showed how long you've been in the breakout rooms and how soon you'll be coming back. That's kind of nice because I usually like grade papers, or I was writing a quiz the other night while they were in breakout rooms. So that kind of helps you to keep track of your time. When the time is about to expire, you're going to get a pop-up that says, what did it say, Donna? Are you ready to close the room? Something like that?
It said, yeah, are you ready to close? And it said close now or give additional time.
Okay.
And the nice thing was if you select close now, that's when the countdown starts. So the 60-second countdown starts from there.
So one little tip there is you need to add an extra minute. So when I gave you 7 minutes, it was actually 8 because you had that 60 seconds to come back. So if you're really timing things closely, just build that in. The other thing, it was on one of my slides, but I forgot to emphasize it, is that the host will be left alone in the main classroom and videotaping will continue. Take note of that. So if you're like looking, you know, and putting lipstick on, they're going to see that if they watch the video. If your partner walks in and says something to you, that's going to be on the video. So, you know, you may want to stop the video or at least turn off your camera and sound. These are all, you know, hard-won tips. The other thing you can do, obviously, is pause the video, but in my experience, even with a bright blue Post-it note on my computer thing that says start the camera again, I still forget to do it. So my recommendation would be when you set up your meeting to go ahead and tell it to automatically start the camera and then just leave it on. They can always fast forward through this part unless you're doing something really interesting, and then they will watch. The other thing you may notice when you go into your control panel is the option to set up groups in advance of the call. I tried to do that once and it didn't work, and I did it using their email addresses. If anybody figures out how to do that, please let us all know, because it was a little discombobulating to me. I thought that I had everything all set up and I was just going to hit go when I got to go to class, and I actually kind of had to learn on the fly how to get them into groups and send them. Okay, so we had a nice discussion going on. You got the experience of Donna popping in and lurking, and I'll just ask you, what application of this could improve the learning experience, and what could go wrong? And go.
Okay, I'll start, Stacy. I was in a group with Drs. Jones and Doyle, and we really concentrated on the first question, unfortunately more than the second. And we thought Dr. Jones brought up a good point of, for those students who you may not have them raise their hand in the real class, this gives them a little bit more of a smaller group to come together and voice their opinion. So it gives everybody a chance to really talk over the concepts presented. As far as kind of active learning exercises, Dr. Doyle and I kind of talked about a Think, Pair, Share resource where you can use this and pair up or group individuals, provide them with a particular kind of prompt and let them explore, give them time to explore and come back into the group to answer a question. Also thought about this as a possible way of debating. So break the class into two groups, a pro and con. The instructor presents a type of question prompt and lets the group think for themselves. It gives them a shorter window of time than really doing a debate in a discussion forum where it's text heavy, but also you can present your evidence and your position. So this is really where you got to think on your feet quickly with your team to present your case. So those are some ideas we came up with.
Thank you. Those are awesome. I'm actually taking notes, and before I send the slides, I will add a slide that summarizes your answers to the questions. Okay, who's next?
Well, Stacy, I'll go ahead and jump in. First of all, thank you very much, Stacy, for this informative presentation. This is great. I wish I would have had this before I taught my last 6 weeks, which was just the first session, because I do want to confirm that they are quite, the undergrad course I taught, they were quite reticent and hesitant to speak. And I think they would have been much more open to speaking in the breakout groups. Steve and I were a group, and you answered one question about what happens with the recording when you break into breakout sessions. So thank you for that. That was one of the questions we had. Steve on the pluses said that, you know, this is going well in his classes, and he has some very large graduate courses, 16 to 30 students in each. And, you know, he does a prompt and they break out to breakout groups, and it's really going good. We did have a question about if somebody steps away from the class to use the restroom, to grab a drink, whatever, and then they come back. And you alluded to this a little bit, I think, in your presentation, but you know, but they haven't accepted the breakout button. That was something we were a little bit confused about and weren't sure about that. That's just one comment. And then I had one that deals with something that I've been, and all of us, I think, have been dealing with, that the bandwidth and Wi-Fi issues on the campus now are more problematic for a lot of us than working from home. I don't know if anybody else is experiencing that. I know I've been in meetings the last couple of weeks where we're having some issues with GoToMeeting and HD Meeting, et cetera, on the campus. So if, for example, a faculty member decides to do the class part with breakout meetings from their physical office downtown, but they're going to their students and the bandwidth is problematic physically on campus, that's an issue I think that could be a little bit of a problem here, but I know that's an extrapolation, but that's just something I wanted to bring up that I think could become, you know, frozen screens and other things like you were talking about your own class. So just FYI in that, I know that's kind of an Ezra question, but in reality, that could affect some of our faculty if they're doing a class in the morning or something from their offices at times. So just throwing that out there, and that's basically all we had. Thank you.
Awesome. I will respond to a couple of those, and Angela, jump in, or anybody else who has thoughts on that. What happens if someone steps away and misses the instructions was one of the questions. So Donna and I had this experience when we sent you all. We could see that there were still 3 people who had not accepted their invitation, and so their name was showing up in the list of who's in the main room. So and they had their cameras turned off, so I was able to just call by name and say, if you're still there, here's what you need to do to accept your invitation to go into your room, and that happened. There is a way to manually send people to the room if they haven't accepted that, and Donna and I were playing around a little bit with finding that, but I would say to avoid that, it may be just easiest to have them automatically sent without having to accept the button. I think Donna did that so you could see what it's like, but I'm not sure there's a whole lot of value added in that. So I would just go ahead and send them. Angela, does that?
Yeah, and honestly, I haven't think around with it enough to go ahead and just send them to the breakout. Like, so with the students that I had doing it, after we all went through our own first trial at it, we all kind of figured it out, and they would just accept the invitation and go. And there were like a handful that would be a little delayed accepting the invitation, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're stuck. There's something wrong. What do I do? And so as soon as I would begin to try to figure out how to connect them, they would then. So I've not had to make any other different strategy yet, but what you just said is very helpful, because I'm sure there'll be a time when I will have to do that.
Yeah, and you make a good point. Even when it's happening automatically, it's kind of like they disappear in waves. So it can take a little while for everybody to leave. It can also take a little while for everybody to come back. So remember that slide where I said build in transition time? Even here, you've got to build in transition time. And then the second question was about, or actually not a question, but a comment about bandwidth issues. I will say I have not tried doing this from campus, but I have experienced those same things from home. In fact, I thought I was the only unlucky one the other night, and I was on a call with Minda Reeves, who happened to mention that she had lost her class. And it was on the same day, different time of day. Hers was during the day. Mine was around 5 p.m. So I don't know. I think that that's why it's good to have that backup plan for how you're going to communicate with them if this fails. And one thing I have heard is that turning off cameras can help with bandwidth issues. There's pros and cons to that. Last spring, when we were all new to this, I was not enforcing the turn your camera on rule. And then I started calling on people who weren't there. So I now have a rule that you must turn your camera on. And again, another presentation for another day would be to think about how to change your background, because for some students, requiring the camera on can be a little intrusive in terms of their home environment or wherever they are. We had one more group, I think. Let's hear from you. Okay.
That would be Team Ian, Leah, and myself. And the nugget that we each liked was the one that you kind of started us off with, which was, oh, I'm sorry, my phone was doing something wacky. But it was the nugget of taking a picture or a screenshot of the questions, because that was frequently, not frequently, but occasionally a remark or a question or something the students would have in my breakout groups, is I would leave them with 2 or 3 questions or to-dos or something. And when I would pop in, they were like, so what was the third thing? And so anyway, having that small, quick little fix that makes a big impact was what our big takeaway was. And we just like how the breakout rooms do encourage participation, much like you said earlier. And the things as far as like going wrong, some of it was just related to, it's still kind of new skill building and just kind of like the anxiety with that. So when things do go wrong, but we all know, we also admitted that the best way to fix that is to practice with it and be intentional with the practice. So it's not really, how do we navigate the challenges that just stump us? Because right now for me, it's, I don't know what I don't know until I encounter an issue. And so for me, my challenges were the polls. And so I did polls, and I didn't realize, at least that's when I was using Zoom, that the polls would be saved, and if I wasn't careful, I would end up re-polling in the same thing I did the week before. It was really weird. So I haven't quite figured out that challenge, but I don't know if it's the same thing for HD, but anyway, so it's just learning all the tricks to be effective and efficient with it. And then also too, just the breakout rooms don't always align with teaching strategies or teaching methods or styles. So just having an appreciation for that, it's, sometimes just not how a teacher is the most effective according to how they like to teach. So there you have it.
Okay, and I'm going to comment on those comments and then invite others to do the same. Increased participation, yes. I also will say increased satisfaction may result from this. I have the same group of students. They were juniors last year, they're seniors this year, and I had people, that were kind of like this, and so I just was bound and determined that this was going to be better this year. Let's just get on with it. We're going to be doing it this way for a while. Let's just figure out how to do it. So first class, I decided I'm going to use the polls, and I'm going to use breakout groups, and we're going to, all the bells and whistles. It was like diving into a pit of fire, right? But students came away saying, oh, that was so much better. We really liked, I had one that's, next week, will you do that again? And they do really seem to come back from the small group discussions more energized. New skill building can be an issue, yeah. I would say, just be honest with them. I'm doing this for the first time. Hopefully this will work. The transparency is good. Polls. Angela, I have a question for you. When you have a class that meets more than one time, do you use the same link for each class meeting? Or do you build a new link?
That's a good question, because over the summer when I was doing it, just before HD was introduced, I gave up on GoToMeeting, and I just used my own small personal Zoom.
Yeah.
And I probably used the same link. So as opposed to like setting up meetings each separate time, I would just send up. I think that's maybe what I did. So maybe that's the challenge.
And I think that's why you were seeing the same poll there the following week. That would be my hunch.
Okay.
And
Good
if
hunch.
you could delete the poll and then add a new one. Unfortunately, that means if you do the same class next year, you know, you might have to recreate that poll. Unfortunately, HD Meeting, I've asked, there's no way to import a poll from a different call. You literally have to do it over again. Ezra got that question from me as well. By the way, let me chase a rabbit for a second. Talking about bandwidth issues, I have a student who's on a satellite dish, and we really struggled for months, especially with the video bandwidth, and Ezra was super helpful. So if you have bandwidth issues, especially if it's problem solving for a particular student, I really encourage you to use our tech support. But Angela, I think that may be what's going on there. And I would suggest if you're going to use a different link for each class meeting, go ahead and set them all up for the whole class and drop those into your syllabus with the class meeting dates. And then maybe even in Canvas, create class meetings on the calendar for them and put the link there. And then usually on the day before, day of class, I also send out an announcement that says, looking forward to seeing you in class, here's the link. Because it will be a little confusing. Of course, I think the same link, they still have to go find it. So I'm not sure it's all that much harder. And then alignment with teaching style. Yeah, I think that's a valid point. If you're not the kind of person who uses small groups, or if your content doesn't lend itself, this isn't a be all and end all. I will say this, if you're going to use it, this bit right here is as important as what happens out there. Processing the information and talking about it is really where they make meaning of it. Again, back to andragogy. So have we heard from everybody, all three groups? Anybody have anything that you wanted to add from what happened in your group? Okay. We have maybe 2 or 3 minutes. So let me say this, we can open it up for questions and I'll stay as long as people want to. If you want to hang around and play with things, I'm happy to do that. And let's see, anybody have questions or comments?
Thank you very much. I really appreciated this.
Absolutely. Technology can be fun, right?
That's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much, Stacy. I know that you spent a lot of time preparing and working through this for us, and I appreciate it for one, so that now I can build on your expertise and don't have to learn all those things the hard way.
Awesome.
I'll probably still learn some things the hard way, but
well, pay it forward. I have found it very useful to see screenshots and demos, and where they don't exist, if you're teaching something, if you can make screenshots for us and show us how to do something that you're using, that would be awesome. Well, we are about out of time, so thank you so much for coming. And happy teaching to all of you, and may we stay well and engaged. All right.
Thank you.